Well, that's falling apart a little bit, in it, Chelsea fans? Losing 2-0 to Ipswich, just coming off the back of losing to Fulham, their West London rivals, 2-1, just after Christmas. And yeah, it's looking a little bit. It's weird. It's just kind of underwhelming after how good and how exciting Chelsea were and how likable they became. It's weird to see a Chelsea team that was so likable, but this team has started to become that. They had what you could easily describe as the best player in the Premier League this season, Cole Palmer. Caicedo was the best, or one of the best holding midfielders, with the exception of Gravenberch, performance-wise. You know, you were getting higher levels of performances from the likes of Madueke and Sancho and Nicholas Jackson. Uh, Defensively and with the goalkeeper, I still thought they were a little bit ropey, but they were getting by and they were using their qualities well and they were aggressive. And he's just found an issue, I think, with the fact that as much as Chelsea on paper have a pretty bolstered squad, it's deep in terms of quantity. I don't think it's deep in terms of quality, which is a real sad indictment of the money that Chelsea have spent. Now, Enzo Maresca probably feels like he needs to rotate due to the busy schedule of playing the Conference League as he has done throughout December, the Christmas period. And at the end of the day, these players are on big wages, big money was spent on them. He's got to try and do something with them. And it didn't work. And the rotation options that Chelsea used in this game, I thought, were exceptionally poor. And it shows as much as they've done well recently, why there still is some massive errors that were being made in the squad building of this current Chelsea team. But in these situations, it's sometimes easy to put all the focus onto the bigger team because they've lost it. Ipswich, I thought, were fantastic. It was an excellent game plan from Kieran McKenna. He set the team up perfectly. And they may still go down Ipswich, but it's good to see that if they go down, they go down fighting. I would love for them to stay up because it's a sad indictment on the state of English football if the three promoted teams go back down instantly 2 years running. And I would love it to be Ipswich. They play with such quality, they play with such energy and enthusiasm. They've got a good young team, a good young manager, and it would just be a good story for the league. But we'll go over the attacking phase of Chelsea first. Chelsea would try and build up in a almost 3-1-6 from the get go. They didn't transition into the shape. They started it off pretty quickly. Desarzi moved into sort of more of an orthodox right back position. Tosin and Cole were very split, and Chelsea's their back three were very, very split, covered the width of the pitch. Tried to get Jorgensen involved in it, and I've just realised I've given Jorgensen the wrong number. There we go. Problem solved. Problem solving on the spot. And they tried to create as much width with the use of the goalkeeper. Caicedo could sometimes drop in to help progress the ball with either Palmer or Enzo dropping in as the pivot. But there was a lot of width that was created. Enzo, Felix, and Palmer as the central attacking three. Cucurella slowly moving up into a more advanced left position. Madueke high and wide on the right hand side. And Nkunku up top. Ipswich would press man to man aggressively, and they would set a trap for Chelsea that they exploited excellently. And that trap was a brave one because the trap was Levi Cole. And the reason why I think that was brave is because, in terms of the Chelsea players in those deeper areas to try and progress the ball, he is, I think, the player with the highest amount of quality to get the ball up the pitch. And he was left three. He was left as the trigger to go and press and to go and engage in a lot more of an aggressive action. And I think the reason for that is because on the right hand side, you have Cole Palmer, you have Enzo Fernandez, who was coming in from the right hand side to more of a central position, and they are two of the more deadly players for Chelsea in the more advanced stages. If they get space in between defence and midfield, and they're able to attack that back line and find the runners in behind, then you're pretty much done for. And I think McKenna prepared this team with the idea that he couldn't allow the ball to go to those players in space. If the ball came to him when Ipswich were in the more defensive, deeper stage, fair enough. Hopefully, you've got enough players back where you restrict the space for them to be able to cause you some serious damage. In these areas, when there is a lot more space to work with, you can't allow them to get that extra yard because with their technical quality and their passing ability, they can hurt you. So it was brave, it was ballsy, it was risky, and it paid off excellently. And the trigger would come from you'd get Delat pressing onto Jorgensen from Tosin. You'd get Hutchinson going from Caicedo, aggressively pressing Cole. And Hutchinson, despite his on the ball qualities, where he got his goal and good value for it, I thought was excellent in his pressing. I thought he was absolutely top draw. in terms of his aggression, the speed in which he got onto Colwell, the fact that he didn't allow him any real time and space to be able to pick a pass out. Full credit to him. I thought his attitude and his application was top draw. Wes Burns coming onto Cucurella, so it meant that Colwell couldn't just fire that easy pass up the field. Burns stayed tight to Cucurella and really prevented it. Cahusta would come into Caicedo, or Broadhead would come inside from Dizazi and either come into Tossin or into Caicedo here. So again, it blocked off the closer passing ranges for Cole to be able to play out into danger. It meant Jacob Greaves could then engage Cole Palmer higher up in this position. Yao Felix would drop in a little bit as well to maybe try and present an easier option for Cole to potentially play out to. Leaving that defensive line, O'Shea would track him, and O'Shea did a fantastic job, by the way. He was aggressive on Felix, who I don't think coped well with his aggression and with his tenacity. He just didn't seem up for the physical challenge that O'Shea offered. And now with Chelsea locked into this side of the pitch, Cole Palmer cannot be found unless it's with a serious amount of luck in this position. Enzo Fernandez is kept well and truly out of it by Morsey, and with Yao Felix dropping, he does cut off a bit of a passing lane to Enzo Fernandez because there's very little space he could really work with between himself and Caicedo. And João Felix in these deeper areas is not the player that you're going to be that fearful of. Like, he's fairly easy to maintain as the further you get away from goal. You couldn't really find the long ball over to Madueke. That couldn't really be on because he didn't have the time and space to be able to pull away and hit a long diagonal. So, while Ipswich kept the energy up and they kept the aggression levels at a high level, they really prevented Chelsea from playing. The only times I got a little bit of joy was naturally in a high pressing situation. We've spoken about it tons of times before. All it takes is someone to switch off for a second, half a second, lose a yard, half a yard, and that player remaining free for just a minute can cause issues. So let's just say if Cole will turn back inside and play it to Caicedo, Cahusta wasn't just quite as aggressive in coming into him. He could then use that half a second to play forward and play to the space in behind. Another would be with O'Shea being out of his right centre-back position to engage with Felix. This left space on the right side of Wolf Enden, who couldn't come over and cover because he was tasked with looking after Nkunku. And as a result, Enzo Fernandez did a really good job of spotting that space and would make some really good movements off to try and look for the ball from deep and hopefully catch Morsey slacking. The biggest problem is I thought Morsey defended these runs and anticipated the movements fantastically. Thought he tracked Enzo Fernandez really brilliantly and would drop into the defensive line if need be. So we'd almost replace that player in a five-man defence that O'Shea would lead by following Felix. So really responsible, really tactically well-versed and great concentration levels to be able to keep up with the constant changing gears within this Chelsea team that they did try and use to exploit. So fair credit to this Ipswich team for pulling off what would have been a very well thought out game plan by Kieran McKenna. But obviously, with the way this works and with the amount of pressure and possession Chelsea had, Ipswich did get forced back, and this is what it would look like. Now, again, similar shape for Chelsea as they pushed Ipswich further back. It was still the 3-1-6. Colwell and Dizazi would push up high in their positions in the wider centre-back roles, almost going in alongside Caicedo, leaving Tossin quite exposed at the back there. And as well, because Ipswich would go very deep in these areas, they would really squeeze. They'd really try and reduce the space between the midfield four and defensive five. So it meant that Chelsea were pushed a lot higher up. Dizazi and Colwell was playing as attacking tens points with their positioning. But it also meant that Chelsea's tens couldn't really get the time and space in between the lines to have any joy. If there was the slight opening and a passing lane did open up where they could have the ball fed to him, O'Shea would react well to Felix. Greaves would react well to Palmer or Fernandez because they did offer a bit of fluidity and a bit of interchange. And sometimes whoever was in the wide 10 positions would come out into this area to look for the ball from deep to try and create an angle. But there was real good communication levels between the wide centre-backs and the wide midfielders. I spoke about it yesterday when I spoke about Manchester United and their back five and how the relationship between the wide centre-backs and the midfielders was really poor. They were fantastic. Ipswich, if you want a view of how to do a back five and a midfield four well and how to do one badly, just look at the Manchester United Newcastle game and the Ipswich Chelsea game side by side and you'll see how different it is. Obviously that comes from consistency in playing together and time on the training pitch, but it's worth giving credit to because McKenna has pulled this off excellently and the players understood it well. So when he would come too deep, Palmer, whoever was on the left space, It would then be passed over to Broadhead or Hutchinson, who would come up to press and engage. And again, just because they were sat deep, the energy levels for Ipswich didn't drop at all. They were still busy, still working from side to side, still dropping on and moving to the player that seemed the most dangerous at the time. Cahusta and Morse, who defended the centre area of the pitch really well. Delap would hound the deeper areas of the pitch. He would go from Caicedo to toss in. The odd time that Nkunku showed for the ball, Wolf Endon tracked him really well and did a fantastic job at the centre of that defence. And the only time that Chelsea did get a few sights of goal was if the ball fell on the edge of the box to a player that had a little bit of space, they'd produce a shot from range. Walton dealt with everything that came towards him really well. Or let's say there were situations where Felix managed to drop in a little bit deeper and suck O'Shea in a lot further up. This would cause Burns, or if it was on the other side, Leif Davis to narrow in a little bit, and then the long diagonal could get played to either Cucurella or Madueke on this side, and they could find some crosses. Again, very mixed success. I'd say very mixed success, very little success would be the fair assumption. And I just mentioned Nkunku there. I thought he was so anonymous. I just have this thing with Nkunku and players in his style in general. If you're not exceptionally quick, which he isn't, and you're not physically strong enough to deal with the physicality required in the Premier League, which he isn't, you have to be one of two things. You have to be extremely technical with the ball at your feet, almost a Riyad Mahrez like. You know, he was never a quick winger, but unbelievable with the ball at his feet, had so much technical quality. Or you have to have insane positional sense and reading of the game and great qualities with your 1 and 2 touch passing to find the space and then lay it off quickly and already see the run that's coming from your teammates. Almost like a Julian Alvarez type. Again, not quick, not necessarily strong, but just positioning sense to another level. And he was always one step ahead of the opponent on the mental side. And he doesn't do either of those things. I just look at him and I think, I don't know what you're good at. That's just my opinion on him. And so as a result, the combinations, the fact they were playing with the 3 in the central areas instead of the 2, which they normally do, and as a result, I felt like Palmer and Fernandes and Felix, to be fair, just struggled with that overload in the areas. I thought it improved a little bit when Nick Jackson came on and he offered a more of a direct threat to Nkunku and he was making movements and getting him behind and trying his best to stretch that Ipswich defence. But it was a little bit too little too late. And the transition happened, and when it did happen, Chelsea were killed consistently, and it was down to, I'm not going to say it was down to one man, it was a team effort, but Liam Delap, round of applause, everyone. What a performance he gave in every sense. Now, I have a mate who's a Stoke fan who was on loan at either last season or the season before, who could not slate him enough. He thought he was dreadful, and it wasn't just his opinion. I know a lot of people held that opinion. He didn't do much for Stoke in the time he was there, and he was shocked that he could not believe he'd gotten this £20 million move to a Premier League side. And I'd watched an Ipswich game with him a little while ago, and he watched this player and thought, this is not the same player that wore a Stoke shirt. And I would love to know if there are Stoke fans watching this that could corroborate that, just to get that other opinion. Because obviously, a lot of us wouldn't have seen Liam Delap play for Stoke in the Championship. But the transformation he would have made from then to being physically dominant, quick, movement with and without the ball, his ability to create goals as well as score them is top notch. He's got every quality I think you want in a striker. And it wouldn't just be his movement off the ball to receive it into space, almost chase no hopers. And in Broadhead and Hutchinson, Ipswich, when they regained the ball, had players that could carry the ball forward. Now, there was space around Tosin because of the aggressive positioning of Dizazi in Colwell, where they could find these movements. Hutchinson could carry the ball up pretty high because of his own qualities, forcing Colwell back. Delap could make very selfless movements to drag Tosin away, maybe even drag Colwell away, that could create space for Hutchinson to then turn inside, look for the run of maybe Broadhead or Leif Davis on the far side, which they did look to exploit. And I think the right-hand side of Chelsea was a lot more vulnerable for Ipswich to exploit, as much as Liam Delap would typically favour the left side of that Chelsea defensive area. Issue on the right-hand side for them was Dizazi, Palmer, Enzo Fernandez, who would typically sit in a deeper right-sided base for Chelsea. Noni Madueke, defensively, not the best. They don't transition well at all. Dizazi, I thought, was horrific on the transition. And in terms of players I was speaking about before, where Chelsea have wasted their money on, God, I know there's probably a slight idea of Enzo Maresca realising this, because Dizazi hasn't really played at all this season. But Jesus Christ, he couldn't get near him. He couldn't even give away a tactical foul to kill these Ipswich counter-attacks. He got nowhere near every player. He looked confused by by the counter-attack. Like, almost like he didn't know where to position himself. He didn't know who to close down. He was just a bit like, he was like a dog when you drop a bunch of tennis balls and it doesn't know which one to go for. He was lost. And so as a result, the running power of Davis, the running power of Broadhead, leaving Madueke, Palmer and Dizazi in the dust for them to find space and create. Full credit to them. They did a lot of selfless work on that left-hand side, and it's where the first goal came from, the creation down that side for the penalty, with Liam Delap then making movements. And again, Liam Delap, not just with his off-the-ball movement, as I was just speaking about, but his ability to get on the ball, drive forward with it from deep. Say he's got such running power, not just without the ball, but with the ball. Tosin could not get near him. Like every time it felt like he was trying to gain on him, he had to almost manage his space well because Delap could just fire away from him in a second. And his ability to carry the ball up the pitch, get into a position where he it didn't even look like the shot was on, but he could test Jorgensen with some good efforts. And to be fair, Jorgensen had to be really alert to the shots. He pulled off a few good saves because of the threat that the lap offered. And, integral in the counter-attacks that got Ipswich up the pitch to create the 2 goals. Obviously, won and then scored the penalty and was instrumental in the Hutchinson goal as well. And it was an all-round fantastic performance from Liam Delap. And the spacing behind Colwell, Tosin just couldn't deal with them. And it was a game plan pulled off perfectly from an Ipswich point of view. And to be fair, it wasn't just the transition where Delap found these areas to attack. It was in general play as well. Because the odd time Ipswich did try and build up, and actually before I talk about this, I'll sort them out a bit more proper. The one thing you have to give a lot of credit to Ipswich and to Kieran McKenna for is they clearly have their principle of trying to build out from the back and be a good footballing side. But with Delap, it gives you the option of going direct and beating a press, which I think is so important. You can't just be so predictable in building out from the back every time. It's the one issue I think that faced Russell Martin at Southampton. They were so reliant on building out from the back because they didn't have a direct option to hit. They had quick players, but with the way they invited pressure, they couldn't find the angles that were good enough to hit those players in behind, whether it be Adam Armstrong, Tyler Dibbling. And because of the pressure that they allowed onto themselves, it didn't work. Whereas having Delap, who can chase those lost causes, who can hound defenders, be aggressive in these areas, just bothering centre-backs completely. And because of Chelsea's man-marking system, with Caicedo being the one that drops into Broadhead, Colwell engaging onto Hutchinson in those wide 10 positions, Dizazi moving out into the right-back position, Cucurella in the left-back position. It meant, again, like before, there was a lot of space for them to hit either side of Tosin Adarabioyo. And again, it was almost like Ipswich used the fact that they're a team that are known for trying to build out from back to their advantage by suckering Chelsea into pressing them high to then create the space in behind for Walton to hit long, and it worked a treat. Fantastic. Full credit to Ipswich. They deserve their 3 points, and again, hopefully this gives them momentum to carry on getting some points and get themselves further up the table. Chelsea need to bounce back quick. Falling away from the title now, look, realistically, I think we all know it's Liverpool's. I mean, I'll be shocked if there's anyone else holding the Premier League title at the end of the season, as much as I would love there to be. But don't. The only thing I'll say to Chelsea is I saw a slip up happening. Don't allow it to become a top 4 race. Fall out of the title race, fair enough. Nobody saw you winning it. Don't allow yourself to come into a situation where you might end up losing top 4. Just keep it solid. Keep yourselves ticking over. Win ugly if you have to, and just keep yourself there. Otherwise, you undo all of the good work and the hard work you would have put in prior to these moments. But I'd love to know what you guys think. Let us know in the comments down below. Like the video if you like it, dislike it if you disliked it. Comment down below and tell me why I did that really out of order. That's bothered me a little bit now. Sorry if that ruined anyone else. Subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you next time. In a bit, lads.